Hi, I'm Lawrence.
And I'm Grace.
And we're here to talk about storytelling.
Everyone has a story to tell and their own unique way to tell it.
And we're not talking about a creative writing class assignment. We're talking about your own life story, which no one is more qualified to tell than you.
There's a lot of different ways to tell your story. Writing it down, using your voice, or telling it straight to a camera.
We're going to be looking at 4 very different stories, all told in their own unique ways. And after seeing them, you'll hopefully have a better idea of how to tell your story.
The first thing you need to ask yourself, though, is what is my story? Life isn't structured like a story. It's made up of pieces. So which piece do you pick?
Well, here's Finbar with an example of how one particular moment in time can become a story.
As I wake to the birds calling and the eucalyptus leaves rustling, I smile to myself and think of the day to come. With the red and gold cap on my head, I wolf down breakfast. I leave the caravan as quietly as possible so as not to wake Mum and Dad. We stay here all summer, but it's not just a holiday. I have an important job to do. It's Australia Day, a big day for surf lifesavers. The air is salty, and I hear the seagulls squabbling over last night's fish and chips. The sand is crisp and cool from the high tide overnight. It crunches underfoot as I walk to the boat shed. The flags are planted in the safest place to swim. Cars roar into the car park, and it only gets louder from there. I start to feel a familiar excitement during the butterflies in my stomach, and as the first groups of people reach the sand, we stand ready. It's like the excited fans of a premiership-winning AFL team all pour onto the beach at once. By lunch, we've rescued 11 people and given first aid to over 50. I'm 16 and I've only ever had to rescue one person. He got stuck way out the back and had run out of puff. He looked at me with desperation in his eyes and just said, "Help." This is why I get up early, stand in the midday heat and still want to come back. We work all day, non-stop, helping people, keeping them safe, saving their lives even. This is why we surf lifesavers do what we do.
And there you have it, a unique personal story written by Finbar, told by Finbar, and helped out by visuals.
Finbar's story is a simple concept, but it's engaging because it's so simple. He takes what's relatable, the sights and smells and sounds of summer, and mixes them in with his narrative about saving lives, which is something Finbar is passionate about and most people are interested in but can't relate to.
The trick to telling a good story is kind of like giving your dog a tablet. You've got to wrap up the unfamiliar things in things the audience knows and likes.
Like a tablet wrapped in cheese.
If you've never given a dog a tablet, well, that metaphor mixed an unfamiliar experience with something relatable. Metaphorception.
Okay, so a really important part of storytelling is picking a subject you're passionate about. Let's break this down then. What are you passionate about?
Grab a piece of paper and write down as many answers to that question as you can think of. Don't stress if you think they're not quite right, because you can sort the good from the bad later.
We're talking quantity, not quality right now.
And while you do that, let's check out another incredible storyteller talking about some darker life experiences.
Even though you might be the most qualified person to tell your own story, sometimes it can be the hardest story to tell.
Which is exactly what Trent from Broome found out.
As a teenager, I lived in a tough neighbourhood in Perth. I saw fights, drugs and gangs, and I got caught up in it. I thought living like this meant I was tough, but my life turned when I was 19. I was down the park with my mates and decided to do chin-ups on a soccer crossbar. It wasn't bolted in properly. It fell, crushed my skull and put me into a coma. When I awoke, I lost the sight in one eye and I developed mental illnesses, epilepsy, PTSD, anxiety disorder, and major depressive disorder. I needed trips to the mental hospital just to keep me sane. I couldn't work, so I moved to Broome to live with Mum. The relaxed Kimberley lifestyle started to help me recover, but depression would still sometimes make the smallest issue feel like the end of the world. I needed someone to talk to. I decided to visit a Headspace youth centre. I was pretty sure they wouldn't understand. After all, even I couldn't find words for what was going on in my head. But I found myself saying things I'd never even considered before, like my brain was speaking for itself. I slowly eased off my medications and began actually healing. 3 years since the accident, I'm now a youth mental health advocate, and I've learnt what it really means to be tough. It isn't about how many dangerous situations you put yourself in. It's about fighting through the trials life throws at you. It's not about acting like you're invincible. It's about being brave enough to ask for help when you need it.
As Trent discovered, voicing his thoughts and sharing his story was actually a pivotal point of healing.
So that's why we tell a story. But what about the how?
You probably all know that stories have 3 parts, a beginning, a middle, and an end. But it's actually a bit more complicated.
Trent's story breaks down into roughly 3 parts: before his accident, after the accident, and once he decided to seek help.
Firstly, Trent sets the scene by describing his life before the accident, that he got caught up in the wrong crowd and he was never far from trouble. This is the beginning of his story.
Then the accident happened, and this was a big turning point as it changed his life dramatically, leading to the middle of the story.
In part 2, Trent addresses the accident. He tells us how it affected him, both the mental and the physical impact, but also that it prompted him to move back to Broome to be with his mum.
The final turning point comes when Trent decides to seek help. This changes the direction of his life again, helping him heal and putting him on track to become a mental health advocate. The end of the story actually begins when he first seeks help.
At the end, he loops the story back to the beginning, saying that these moments in his life have taught him what it really means to be tough.
So the breakdown of this is kind of like the old saying, have a beginning,
a middle,
and an end. These 3 key moments are the crux of your story.
Also, it's important to remember that writing about traumatic parts of your life can be difficult. So don't feel like you have to tell these stories if you're not ready to.
Life-changing stories don't always start as dramatically as Trent's. Check out this story from Yong Yan, who lives in Grenfell in New South Wales.
In 2013, my brother and I got on a plane in China, our first international flight. He was 8 and I was 14, and we were moving to Australia. We were heading to our new home in Grenfell, a small country town in New South Wales. Grenfell is so Aussie. Henry Lawson was even born here. My parents run the Happy Inn on the main street. It's the only Chinese restaurant in town. My younger brother was able to adapt into Australian society very easily. He and my cousin often speak English together.
Did you hear about Lionel Messi last night? He scored a hat-trick against Real Madrid.
He learned English much more easily than I did. Maybe it was because of my age. Maybe it was because I wasn't practicing enough. Maybe it was because I don't want to lose the only connection between me and where I come from. Talking to my family in Chinese makes me feel like I belong. I lived in China until I was 14, and I still feel like it's my home. I'm proud to live in Australia, and I love Grenfell. But my Chinese heritage is important too. After finding it difficult at first, my English has come a long way now. I've always loved to write stories, and now I write in both English and in Chinese. When people ask me, "Where do you come from?" I will smile back and reply proudly, I'm Australian, and I'm Chinese.
Yongyan is actually a really good combination of all the stuff we've talked about so far. Like Finva, Yongyan describes her setting really well. She spells out exactly what Grenfell is like.
And like Trent, her story has 3 distinct parts: moving to Australia, finding it hard to adjust to her new life, and realizing she doesn't need to let go of her old life to find a place in her new world.
One of my favourite things about Yongyan's story is that she finds the solution to her problems through the problems themselves. She's struggling to fit in and learn English, which is what helps her realise she doesn't want to lose her connection to Chinese language and heritage.
Yongyan's story is also all about overcoming challenges, which is another important part of storytelling.
Think about your list of stuff you're passionate about. You've probably faced a lot of challenges in doing what you love, so write down as many of those challenges as you can.
Somewhere on that list of challenges is a story worth telling.
So, to give you another example of an immersive story about the challenges you face to do what you love, here's Molly's story.
Wyndham in the Kimberleys is famous for its big things. Big crocodiles, big landscapes, and we have big families, like mine. My mother is one of 8, and I am the oldest out of 25 grandkids, so I grow up with family all around me. I can have a cuppa or a feed anytime, anywhere. But when I was 12 years old, I made a huge leap out of my comfort zone. I received a scholarship to an Anglican school in Sydney. Arriving there was a big shock. The school was massive. I was the only Indigenous student at the school. I was very shy. People would ask me really stupid questions like, did I live in a hut? Or did I know what a computer was? I'd reply with one-word answers. I became really homesick, but when I went home, things were different. The kids said I was different.
You talk like a white fella.
You sound like a white fella.
You talk like a white fella.
It made me feel hurt. I was confused. It made me question my identity. Where did I belong? But I kept pushing through, going to school, and it all started to change when I decided to play AFL. Playing on the field, it made me feel like I belonged, like I suddenly found my place. I gained confidence and made friends that I will treasure for a lifetime. They saw leadership potential in me, and I was voted captain of my team. I even started to realize that choosing my own path helped me achieve something great. I became the first Indigenous student to graduate from my school. My story shows that sometimes it's important to get out of your comfort zone. It might be difficult, but it'll be worth it.
Molly's story is another really good example of why your stories matter.
Leaving home to go to boarding school is something that a lot of young people from regional areas have to do, and it can be really hard.
For others going through a similar thing to Molly, seeing a story that reflects their experience can help them understand that they're not alone.
And there's a lot of high school students out there that don't feel like their stories are reflected correctly by the media, or that they're misrepresented. So this is a chance to have a voice, to have your own say.
Use your story as a launchpad to talk about what's important to you.
So that brings us to the pointy end.
You've thought about what you're passionate about and found a challenge you want to write about.
You've thought about how you might structure your story, and you have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
You've made it relatable and interesting to an audience.
So the only thing left to do is get writing.
Good luck!